Good evening, I'm Cynthia Ng and you are tuning in to AWANI Tonight. Singapore High Court grants a stay of execution for Malaysian man on death row. And IMF warns inflation for emerging economies to hit 8% this year. More on that, stay tuned. Students will no longer require to adhere to physical distancing rules in classrooms, but face masks are still compulsory indoors on school premises. Education Minister Dr. Razzie Jidin announced a number of revised guidelines as all students will be required to return to schools from May 1st, in line with the relaxation of COVID-19 SOPs. Teachers, regardless of vaccination status, must also return to school for face-to-face teaching. He said the rules on attendance will return to how they were before the pandemic began. Parents must provide a letter explaining their children's absence if a student does not attend school. School registration for Form 1 and Form 4 students is expected to begin on May 13th. Razzie added that school uniforms would be made compulsory when the second semester begins on June 12th. The Singapore High Court granted a stay of execution for Malaysian Datchinamurthy. The 36-year-old sentenced to death on drug trafficking charges was supposed to be hanged tomorrow. The Singapore Attorney General's chambers had tried to overturn the stay of execution today, but it was rejected by the Court of Appeal. Datchinamurthy's lawyer M. Ravi said the Singapore court granted the stay of execution pending the outcome of Datchinamurthy's prison correspondence misconduct legal challenge. According to Lawyers for Liberty founder N. Surendran, Datchinamurthy had argued the case himself after failing to secure a lawyer to represent him. The matter will be heard by the court on May 20th. Datchinamurthy was sentenced to death for smuggling 45 grams of diamorphine into Singapore in 2011. This comes after Nagendran Dharmalingam's execution the day before for drug trafficking charges as well. Meanwhile, Singaporean authorities have again disputed that Nagendran was intellectually disabled and implied saying so was misinformation. Its Central Narcotics Bureau argued that having a low IQ does not mean Nagendran had a disability. Nagendran was on death row for more than a decade for trafficking about 43 grams of heroin into Singapore. He was executed on Wednesday after the courts rejected his final appeal. His body was brought back to his hometown in Tanjung Rambutan, Perak in the evening. His funeral will be held on Friday. The International Monetary Fund (IMF) warned that emerging markets could see inflation hit 8% this year. The Russian-Ukrainian conflict has put pressure on commodity prices, with oil and gas supplies tight after years of subdued investment and geopolitical uncertainty. The IMF forecast inflation to reach 8.7% in emerging economies and developing countries this year, the fastest clip since the global financial crisis in 2008, but it expects the effect to be one-off. Meanwhile, advanced economies are expected to reach a 38-year high inflation of 5.7%. Malaysia, a net food importer, is one of many emerging markets already hit by surging food prices. Consumers are facing costlier food while they are still reeling from the effects of the pandemic. The MACC said it has the power to investigate all public officers, including judges, upon receiving an official report or complaint. In a statement today, the Commission urged the public to give them the room to carry out all processes as permitted under the law. The statement was issued following criticisms against MACC for opening an investigation into Court of Appeal Judge Datuk Muhammad Nazlan Muhammad Ghazali over allegations of unexplained money in his account. MACC said once the investigations were completed, the investigation paper will be submitted to the Attorney General's chambers to decide whether to prosecute or not. MACC said 3 complaints were lodged against Nazlan. Senior lawyers and politicians claimed that the investigation into Nazlan was an attack on the independence of the judiciary and the rule of law. The government is studying the possibility of tightening laws to check against offensive posts on social media. Communications Minister Tan Sri Anwar Musa said, although existing laws could be used against offenders, it was not so effective in checking contents uploaded from overseas platforms. Citing an example of content uploaded on Facebook or Twitter, the Malaysian Communications and Multimedia Commission has no power to take it down. And for it to ask help from the overseas-based platforms, it will need to do preliminary investigations before bringing the matter to the Attorney General's chambers to seek the cooperation of the country concerned. The process, he said, is quite lengthy, and that is why the ministry is looking into the possibility of strengthening certain provisions in the existing law. Several Rohingya detainees who escaped from the Sungai Bakap immigration detention depot last week have been sighted in Selayang. Immigration Director General Datuk Sri Khairul Zaimi Daud said the department is working with the police to locate them. At present, 61 detainees are still at large. He said most of the escapees were believed to be street smart, especially in areas in Penang and Kuala Lumpur, as they had worked and resided there before. In the mass breakout on April 20th, a total of 528 Rohingya detainees escaped from the depot after staging a protest. 6 of them were killed after being hit by cars while crossing the North-South Expressway. The escape of hundreds of detainees from the immigration depot shines a light on our troubled refugee policies and practices. What needs to change? Tonight on Consider This, we talk to our guests about this issue. We'll continue after the break. Stay with us.
Milo. Menangi hadiah berjumlah RM500,000 bersama Milo. Jom sertai sekarang.
Bahmun semua padian, lihatlah Awani Borneo jam 7 malam setiap hari banyak berita-berita cerita kita ni hanya di Astro Awani.
Welcome back. The COVID-19 pandemic has shown that working from home is a viable option for employees and has now become the new norm for companies adopting a hybrid working arrangement. However, some question the viability of the model and suggest that workers who do opt for the arrangement to receive a salary cut. Muhammad Effendi Abdul Ghani from MTUC strongly believes otherwise and is here to give us the reasons why he believes that salaries should remain as is.
The fact is that there's two statements, there's two statements from the ministry on the October 2020 stress that salary payment for workers in area declared on to be involved in the conditional movement control and instructed to work from home with certain conditions should be paid as usual. This is ministry statement that time. And second, meanwhile, there's a statement from the MEF in the June 2021 has stressed that employers cannot deduct the amount of annual leave and the salary of workers working at home during the implementation of the first phase of the total lockdown by June 14. This is a statement from the MEF to say that we cannot cut as workers' salary and annual leave. What we recommend to the employer is to talk to the workers. This is a statement by the MEF. So for the MTC, through by these two statements, MTC is of the view that is inappropriate for the employer to deduct the worker's salary when they work from home until such time as their need for work to work from home is still required. It should be noted that the government has also spent R1 billion in various initiatives to help all the citizens during the pandemic, including the wages subsidy program for the employer to ensure that workers can continue to work. So it's inappropriate for the employer to deduct any worker's salary even in working from home because the employer must comply with the Section 24 Legal Deductions in Employment Act 1955. And the employer must also comply with the legal process before deducting the worker's salary.
As the country transitions to the endemic phase, Effendi believes that employers need to be prepared to allow more flexible arrangements for workers.
The need of a work from home is still not urgent, but employers need to be prepared. As in the amendment of the Employment Act 1955, Amendment 2021 has been amended for the flexible hours, flexible work arrangement. Employer can write to the employees can write to the employer to apply for flexible working arrangement to change his hours, day or place of work, and wait for the return response within the 60 days. So with a strict standard operating procedure SOP that can definitely control these situations. The current contingent situation is under control, and need for work from home can still be made the choice of the employer. Importantly, all the parties need to ensure that the SOP adhere to so that no contingents occur among the employees.
As workers bear the cost of increased utility costs when working from home, employers must ensure that they can access the same tools from the office at home to ensure productivity.
Even the employer needs the employees to work from the home. I think there's so much things that the employers must make sure that the quality of work still remain as the same workplace, because in the same time, the employees need to bear the cost for increasing of the utility and so on. And most important thing that the tools to work at home must similar with tools to work on the workplace. I think this is limitation that I think is better that it's at the beginning we have from work from home until now. This is better that I think the workers are facing, that must be clear on this. Yeah.
On to international news. Finland and Sweden will be able to join NATO quickly should they decide to ask for membership in the military alliance. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said that he will find ways to bridge the interim period between the country's application and their formal ratification by all 30 NATO members.
Let me also add to the question about Finland and Sweden that I actually speak to the Finnish president later on today, and I expect that we will both address the issue of a potential Finnish application for NATO membership, but also the need to find arrangements in this interim period so there is no uncertainty about Finland and Sweden's right to choose their own path. Because this is fundamentally about the right of every nation in Europe to decide its own future.
Sweden and Finland have earlier agreed to submit simultaneous membership applications to the US-led NATO alliance as early as the middle of next month. The Kremlin said their alignment to NATO would force Russia to strengthen its defenses in the Baltic, including by deploying nuclear weapons. Russian President Vladimir Putin yesterday warned of lightning-fast retaliation if countries interfere in Ukraine, singling out the United States to stop sending arms to Ukraine. While Russia presses its military assault in the eastern and southern parts of Ukraine, its economic battle with the West threatens gas supplies to Europe. At the same time, sanctions are taking a heavy toll on Russia, with its economy expected to shrink by as much as 12.4% this year. Indonesian President Joko Widodo's announcement to ban palm oil exports last week boosted his approval ratings. He announced drastic measures to control food prices by banning palm oil exports, aimed at dealing with domestic shortages. The ban covers nearly all palm products, which are used in staples like cooking oil. As Jokowi said, people's need for affordable food trumped revenue. The move boosted his rating 4 points to 64.1% in an independent survey conducted recently. But it is still lower than the record high of 75.3% in January. Analysts say the approval rating increase is because the president's policy is in line with the public's popular preference. That is all for AWANI tonight. For the latest news, head on to astroawani.com. I'm Cynthia. Thank you for watching. Good night.